Buenos días para todos. La siguiente conferencia va a ser en inglés, por si alguna persona necesita un equipo de traducción simultánea, este es el momento correcto para salir por él. For me, it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Thomas Robinson, giving him a warmest welcome to our city, Medellín, the city of eternal springs. Welcome, Dr. Robinson, to Medellín, a city that has taken out his ADN to transform the city through impact, through innovation, impact and engagement, all the publics, the academic, the government, and the enterprise, to transform the city and be one of the most entrepreneurial cities of Colombia. Thank you so much to be here. El doctor Thomas Robinson es presidente y CEO de Aacsb, una de las acreditadoras más importantes en el mundo de los negocios. Su formación académica tiene una maestría y un doctorado de Werther School of Management de la Universidad de Case Western Reserve. Es licenciado en Economía de la Universidad de Pensilvania. Se ha desempeñado, ahora actualmente es el presidente y CEO de Aacsb. Fue director general de Educación, director general de América en el Instituto de la CFA, donde dirigió un equipo multifuncional que participó en el desarrollo de estrategias de educación y compromiso para la región de América Latina. Aparte de esto, se ha desempeñado como profesor, director de programas de maestría y también en el tema de consultoría en las áreas de contaduría pública, con planificación financiera y manejo de alternativas de inversión. Así que, bienvenido, doctor Robinson, a Medellín, a Cladea 2016.
Buenas tardes. That will be the extent of my Spanish, because listening to me for an hour in Spanish would be almost as painful as listening to Donald Trump in any language. So, trust me, it's painful for me too. So I'd like to thank Cladea and Esmalfa for having me here today. I'm particularly pleased to be here at a conference on innovation in the city of innovation. And so we're very pleased to be here. I noted that in the introduction you hit all of the fine points of AACSB accreditation, engagement, innovation, and impact. Innovation is very important for us. In fact, we issued the 2013 standards focusing on innovation, engagement, and impact. And then I joined the organization about a year ago. We decided to go through a strategic planning process and look at ourselves the same way that we were looking at business schools. So one of the things that we just did recently is create a new mission and vision for AACSB. And our mission today, and this is brand new, is to foster engagement, to accelerate innovation, and to amplify impact in business education. So we're going to hold ourselves accountable for the same type of innovation that we're now holding business schools accountable for. Our vision is much more outward looking as well. Our vision now is to transform business education for global prosperity. And you'll see why that's important when we start talking about the elements of the vision for business education that we just released. So let's talk a little bit about today's business environment. Oh. So whether it goes forward or backward is a bit random. Oh, one more. Perfect. So as we heard today from PepsiCo and others, we have a global business environment. Companies are operating on a global basis, but yet they still have to understand that local context. We need to prepare students to work for global organizations, but also work for local organizations, and within the global organizations to help understand that local context, the local consumer preferences and needs and demands. Business is complex, so The CFA Institute was mentioned earlier. When I first prepared for the CFA exam was the 1990s. And at that time, we had to study about 12 books in order to take a series of exams. When that exam started in the 1960s, there were, I think, 3 books, and it was a 12-page exam. When I took it, there were about a dozen books, and it was 18 hours of exams over the course of 3 years. When I left CFA Institute a year ago to join AACSB, at that time, the curriculum was 18 books, 9,000 pages, and still 18 hours of examination. So just imagine the depth of knowledge that someone needs to have in order to practice in investments today in the finance industry. It's very similar in accounting. When I first studied accounting, there weren't as many standards. We only had to understand the standards of, at that time, in my case, the United States. Today, a student going through needs to understand their domestic standards as well as international financial reporting standards. Just look at what's happened with technology. With technology being all around us, we're collecting data on all sorts of things. So we have more data today than we've ever had before. So you have the need for people with a deep understanding of data analytics. So today, because of the complexity of the business world, the depth and breadth of knowledge that someone needs to practice in management is greater than it's ever been before. Business is also dynamic. We're seeing things change at a rapid pace. Companies that existed when I was at the university that were considered blue chip companies have gone out of business. Today, some of the top global companies are companies that we hadn't heard of a decade or 2 ago. So things are changing at a rapid pace. Things are also competitive. Businesses are competing on that global scale. Business schools are competing more, which is interesting that we have venues like this. It was one of the things that impressed me the most when I joined AACSB a year ago was the willingness of business schools to share their best ideas with others in venues like this around the world. It's just amazing given the competitiveness of business in nature. So we're much more open today. Business and business schools are also faced with disruptive forces. We saw that a little bit yesterday. Well, how do you survive and even thrive when there are things that are going on that could disrupt us? Things with online education, alternative qualifications such as certifications to the traditional business education. Well, we believe, and that's why it's baked into the standards, that engagement, innovation, and impact will help you not only survive those disruptive forces, but will help you thrive from disruption. By being very engaged with business and understanding what their needs are today, then you can be prepared and prepare your students for what they're looking for. By continuously updating your program, by continuously improving what you're doing, then you can also be creating new ideas, the next new idea that can stay in step with business or a step ahead of business. And by doing all of that, you can have a greater impact, not just an impact on your students, but an impact on your community, an impact on business, and an impact on greater society as a whole. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some innovation that's going on in business schools, and then I'm going to come back and talk about some of the strategic planning work that we've done, looking at a vision for business schools in particular, which includes, among other things, innovation. So with this complex business environment, this dynamic environment, it's important that business schools innovate. We've certainly seen it here over the last couple of days. We've seen lots of examples of innovation. I had an opportunity to visit the AFIT while I was here. It's amazing some of the things that are going on there. I was visiting Agave in Mexico a couple of weeks ago. Very similar innovation going on. So we're seeing innovation going on around the world. As I mentioned, one of the things we can do is we can share these ideas around the world to help all business schools get better. And so this past year, AACSB had a contest or a challenge where we asked business schools to submit to us some of the innovations that they did. And we received about 300 innovations from our business school members around the world, things that they were doing. We received so many, we actually couldn't profile all of them on our website. So we've put several on the slides. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to highlight 3 examples and then point you to where we have this information on our website and the new challenge that we're issuing next week. So these are just several examples in addition to the ones that you've seen here at this seminar over the last couple of days. This is Singapore Management University, and what they did is they formed a center with the community. So this is business school faculty, it's the local community in Singapore, and it's the students. And what they do is they look at broad problems that can't be solved by any one particular discipline. So I was an accounting professor for a number of years, and my research focused on earnings management. As faculty members, we tend to be focused on our specialty area, and we're focused on researching a very narrow topic. Well, the complex problems of business need to be cross-disciplinary. So the idea with this center is to have it cross-disciplinary. So there's faculty from all parts of Singapore Management University working with the community to identify problems that they have, and the students then get to exercise or participate in an experiential learning opportunity where they're helping solve those problems. And we've seen some examples of that here. You've seen examples at other universities, so we're just using this as one example. This is an example from Canada called Metabus. And what this is it's a research database where they've gone out and they've classified all research that's been done within human resources, and they put it out there on this database. So if you're a researcher who's doing research on human resources, or you're a company that wants to know all of the research that's been done on a particular sub-area of human resources, it's all available in this database. So you can do a meta-analysis. So if you want to know what have studies shown about the culture of an organization, the impact on return on investment, you can get all of those studies in one place. So the idea is to expand this to all areas of management, so we can all very quickly access all of this great research that's going on in business schools around the world. Third example is from Korea, and I know, I wish I had done this when I was in high school. A number of my friends belonged to the debate club, where you would debate social issues primarily, and you would take 2 sides of the argument and you would learn how to build a case for your argument. So at Sawbridge, what they did was they formed a debating society for business students. And it gets business students involved with social issues and debating social issues. So it's very much in tune with where we're trying to go with social responsibility. So these are just 3 examples in how we develop our students, how we help solve real business problems, and how we help disseminate the research that business schools are doing. There are a lot more examples. I would encourage you to visit AACSB's website and take a look at some of these other innovations that we've highlighted. But more importantly, what I'd like you to do is to submit your innovations for this year's challenge. So this is actually, you're hearing this, you're the first group hearing this. In a week, we're going to announce a new Innovations That Inspire challenge, and we're going to ask our member schools around the world to submit their innovations so that we can highlight them on our website or in conferences like this or in publications like BizEd. It's a way of disseminating this information so we can all take the best ideas and see which ones may fit in our particular environment. So I would encourage you next week, if you go there today, you will not see anything about it. October 10th, they will refresh the website with information on how you can submit the innovations that are going on at your schools. So I want to come back to our visioning initiative and strategic planning that we've been doing over the last couple of years. The strategic planning started when I joined a little over a year ago, but AACSB has been working through what they call the Committee on Issues in Management Education for 3 years to look at what are the problems today, what are the challenges, and what are the opportunities with business education. So AACSB was curating or coordinating this effort, but it's not really owned by AACSB. This involved 2,000 business schools, faculty involved in a number of conferences, events. Some of you may have participated about a year and a half ago in something called the Business Education Jam, which was run by IBM and Boston University, where it was a week-long global webinar on business education and what we needed to do to improve business education. That was just one of the hundreds of events or publications that went into being synthesized or curated in this process. We set up a website for this. We had about 15,000 people visit the website, participate in discussion forums. And what we looked at is what were the shifting roles of management in society. So what's being required of people that are working in business or management? As a result of that, what's now then being required of business education? And then lastly, what opportunities may there be for business schools given the direction that business and business education are headed? So as you might expect, being an association of business schools, we do the typical things that we do. So we do a SWOT analysis. We look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for business education. So we'll start with some strengths, and there are quite a few. Business schools actually started in practice. So we certainly heard some examples this morning of a business school that started first and then the university, but that's a little unusual. Actually, in most cases, the business school came up later after a university was founded. And initially, when business schools were founded, they were taught and led by practitioners. And there was some criticism that they didn't have the same level of rigor that other parts of the university had. In terms of pedagogy, in terms of the research that they did. And business schools did a fantastic job over the last few decades at getting really proficient at research. So not only are we founded and based in practice, but business schools have developed a strong ability to create knowledge and intellectual property over the past few decades. So it's phenomenal where we are today. We're experts in pedagogy. We do it better than anyone else, and you can see some of the innovations that we've heard about at this event. We have very highly qualified faculty around the world. We've been leaders in terms of looking at business models and helping businesses. We've been innovative, particularly in recent years. And, as I mentioned earlier, we're willing to share the best ideas across our network. So those are some of the good things about business schools. Some of the weaknesses. Our business models are under pressure. There's lower levels of funding coming from other sources. So from the national government, from the local government, from all sources there's pressure. There's pressure on tuition dollars. So we certainly have some issues with business models within business education. Because most business schools sit within a university setting, as the last speaker noted, things can move slowly in a university setting, much more slowly than they do in a business setting. And that's a constraint, to some extent, on a business school's ability to innovate. If a business school is sitting within a broader university, as much as we want to be on the leading edge, we are somewhat constrained by the university in which we sit. Obviously, if you're a standalone business school, you don't have that same constraint. Because of the financial resources, sometimes it's difficult to keep up with the technology changes to the same extent that businesses do. So those are some of the weaknesses. So, thank you. So in terms of threats, we mentioned obviously the shrinking financial support, demographic changes. Demographics are changing around the world. It depends on where you are. If you look globally, the UN has fantastic data that projects out the college-age population over the next 5 decades, and they do it based upon fertility rates and death rates and all of those things. And if you look globally, the college-age population is going to increase about 7 or 8% over the next 3 decades. In some parts of the world, in some countries in Asia, it's actually declining. In other parts of the world, like Africa, the population is going to double over the next 3 decades. So you have these demographic changes that are going on around the world. You're also seeing a shift, a continuing shift towards urbanization. So the UN estimates that in the next 10, 20 years, about 2/3 of the population are going to live in urban centers. And those urban centers are going to require somebody to manage the infrastructure, somebody to manage the city. So all of those things are threats to some business schools and some universities. There's alternative means of achieving education. So as was mentioned, I spent the last 8 years running education globally for CFA Institute. Some of you may consider that to be a competitor to a business school because you achieve a certification as an alternative. So that's a potential challenge. On the other hand, at CFA Institute, we actually viewed it as a collaborative arrangement. So we formed partnerships with universities. So you could get your degree at the same time you were going through the CFA program. But there are other qualifications out there that are seen as alternatives to traditional business education. Badges on LinkedIn and those types of things. LinkedIn has now bought an education company. Fortunately, it's not focused on degrees. It's really focused on fairly basic job skills. But there are potential threats out there from organizations like LinkedIn that may move into the degree and certification field. There's an increased need for us to service this global and yet local business population and student population. And probably the most important, and that's the last graphic there, the traditional trusting somebody that you'll fall backwards. The level of trust in business education is actually better today than it was a decade ago. But what did it look like after the financial crisis in 2008? It was terrible. We were vilified as, this is the top 1% and they're not inclusive. And so business got a bad rap. It's come back a little bit. Doesn't help that we have a businessman running for office in the U.S., but I'll stay away from U.S. politics. We could have a better example, like Warren Buffett running for president. But those are some of the threats. The idea with this visioning process was to think about what are the opportunities. And fortunately, while there are challenges, there are as many opportunities. Now, if you go to our visioning website, you can take a look at all of the data that went into this, some videos, some interactive information on lots of opportunities. What we're going to focus on today are the top 5 key opportunities. So, these are broad opportunities. It's not meant to be prescriptive. So what I don't want you to take away from this session is these are the 5 things that you need to be doing at your business school in order to survive. These are 5 ideas for where we think the major opportunities are. You need to look at your particular context, your particular unique resources, and things that you're already doing, because a lot of you from the examples we've seen are doing some of these things already. So this is a menu. Think about it as a menu to look at and choose from things you may want to focus on as you move your business school forward. And we have further information, as I mentioned, with the full document of the vision, future vision for business education is available. Some copies still at our desk out front, but you can download it on our website or take a look at a video on the website. As I mentioned, in many cases, business schools are already embracing these. I'm going to talk about each one in turn, but just initially, Catalyst for Innovation, what this conference is about. We'll talk about that more in detail. There's more business schools can do there in being sort of a hub or catalyst for innovation throughout society. Co-creators of knowledge, working more closely with business and with other disciplines to co-create knowledge, not just create it on our own and then try and push it out there. Leaders on leadership. As I mentioned, in the way that the world population is going, we need leaders not just in business, we need leaders out there in societies, in nonprofit organizations, in government. Business schools have the unique ability to train leaders across all disciplines, across all aspects of society, and there's more that we can do to take ownership of that. We can be more hubs of lifelong learning, and we'll talk in more detail about that, of what the needs of different students are today, and the need to continue your learning throughout your lifetime, throughout your career. And then most importantly, although we're going to talk about it last, is being an enabler of global prosperity. So what business schools can do to really move society forward and to tell the stories about what we've already done in terms of advancing society. So first, for Catalyst for Innovation. This is an opportunity for us to drive economic development. We've seen some examples already with business schools using incubators and other ways of infusing innovation within their students within the business school. But we also need to get out there in other parts of the university. So ideas can come from anywhere. They can come from the medical school, they can come from other parts of the sciences, they often come from the engineering school. So business schools can take the lead in collaborating with those other parts of the university in fostering innovation. Who's better at bringing a new product or new process to market than a business school? Certainly the doctors don't know how to do that. The engineers don't necessarily know who to do that. It doesn't mean that all innovation and all innovation courses have to happen in the business school, but the business school should be involved wherever those are happening across campus. And it's not just innovation in terms of creating new products and services, but if you look at existing companies like PepsiCo, they want students who come in with an innovative mindset so that they can create new products or refine existing products. So when I travel around and visit business schools and I ask students, how many of you want to own your own business someday? And sometimes all hands go up, but typically on average it's about 30 or 40%. In reality, there's probably not going to be 30 or 40% that are going to start and run their own business, but most of them are going to be working in an environment where innovation and entrepreneurship are important, even if it's within a larger company. So we can do more across the university. We can also do more to engage with business. And so I saw a great example at EAFIT this week where the cement company Argus has a facility on their campus where they're doing research. So we can do more like that to actually get businesses co-located with us on our campuses or us co-located with them to help them do their research. So instead of us focused on a particular narrow area that may be of interest to me, but when I'm done with the research, business may not be interested in it. Why not work with them from the beginning on these new ideas and go throughout the process? Lastly, so there's several aspects to this. It's about innovation in pedagogy. So how are we teaching? Are there better ways of teaching? Doing more experiential learning? Taking advantage of technology to move things out of the classroom that are basic knowledge acquisition. We can put those online and we can focus on the classroom in students doing real experiential learning, solving real problems. So we want to be innovative in the way we teach our business classes. And we're already doing that within business schools. How many of you think that business schools are doing it better than other parts of your university? Oh, that's not very many hands. I expected all the hands to go up. From what I've seen, I would say that business schools are probably the most innovative in terms of what's happening. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to get out and visit some of the other departments. But I think there's a lot that other parts of the university can learn about what business schools are doing. Think about upper management at your university, and we may have some members of upper management here. Imagine the ability of business schools to train those leaders across campus, to give them that management or leadership experience. Now, they may not want, the president of your university may not want to take a leadership program from your business school, but maybe they could go to a collaboration with another business school. So there are opportunities for business schools to work on innovation across campus, not just within the business school. So there's lots of things to do here. I would say probably the most important thing is creating the right ecosystem, working with your business community, and working cross-disciplinary across campus. So new ideas, new products, innovation can't occur just within the business school. It's going to require much more cross-disciplinary work. And we're going to have to embrace risk. But the advantage of embracing that risk is by taking risk in finance, we know if you take greater risk, there's the possibility for greater return. And the same thing is true within a business school environment. So I've alluded to this a little bit. but being more of a co-creator of knowledge. So not just working on a research product in a silo within an academic setting, but working with businesses to solve current business problems. And we saw several examples of those today. I'll give you another example from Europe. Not too long ago, we had a board meeting of AACSB in Amsterdam where we opened a new office. And we took the board out to visit Erasmus Business School in Rotterdam. And they have a unique consortium there called the Smartport. This is a consortium of the local business community in Rotterdam, which are virtually all economically tied to the Port of Rotterdam. And it includes business schools, undergraduate schools, it includes a law school, and what they do is they form committees with the business community and with the academics from the various disciplines, and they talk about what are the business problems that the port is facing today, and what are the business problems of the individual companies that service the port facing today. And then the academics take that and they go back and they form research teams. So they get together a group of master's students or doctoral students under the supervision of a professor usually, as well as someone from the business community, and they work on a research project from start to finish that business has already bought into. So you know that the business community is going to read the output of that research, and you know that it's going to have an impact because business is involved from the beginning. So it's a type of arrangement that we can think more about doing. We can collaborate more with the business community, but we can also partner with other parts of the university. So as I mentioned, some of the biggest societal problems can't be solved just with business. So you may need to bring in people from political science, from law, from philosophy to solve some of the major problems we have today in the world. So there's opportunities for business schools to think more about co-creating knowledge with other parts of the university. Now, I'm not going to say that's not going to be challenging, because if you look at the typical promotion system for a new faculty member, they're induced or encouraged to focus on a particular narrow field and do research in that area. It actually, our models don't foster this idea of collaborating with other disciplines either outside the business school or even within the business school. So we've got to work on that. It may be that we need to start with our senior faculty, those that have already reached a level where they can afford maybe to do some research that's a little out of the box, where they can collaborate with somebody in philosophy or collaborate with somebody in political science to solve some of the major problems in the world that need to be solved. But we think there's real opportunities for business schools to be co-creators of knowledge with other disciplines and with the business community. Hubs of lifelong learning. This is probably the biggest opportunity. Today, as I mentioned, the breadth and depth of knowledge that you need in your career has never been greater. It's also different at different points of your career. So when I started off my career, and I'll talk a little bit in the next section as well about how I fell into business, which wasn't my plan, but I started off as an accountant. And I had to have this deep specialized knowledge early in my career. But as I progressed and moved into management within the accounting firm, I needed to have management skills. I needed to know how to lead people and how to evaluate people. And then today, with what's going on in data analytics, somebody who was working in another field doing analysis may need to come and get a new specialization in a new field because their old job has disappeared. We don't necessarily know what the jobs 5 or 10 years from now are going to look like. So we need to make sure people know how to learn, and they are engaged in lifelong learning throughout your career. So this is a visual that I put together sort of based on some of my work in practice in public accounting, then in academia, and then most recently with CFA Institute. But at different points of your career, you're going to need specialized knowledge. At other points, you're going to need more generalized knowledge. And you're going to need to continually refresh yourselves. So I'll tell you a trend that we've noticed in the data among CFA Institute accredited schools. If you look at from 2010 to 2015, If you look at overall business school enrollments, they were up by about 9%. But when you drill down in the data, you see that undergraduate business majors were up about 7%, and graduate business majors or graduate business students enrollments were up about 10%. But when you drill down within that master's student, what do you think you found? Within the MBA program, it was actually down. So MBA enrollments over that time period were down about 6%. Specialty master's programs enrollments were up 40% in that same 5-year period. And as a result, overall graduate enrollments were up. That's part of what's going on in fields like finance, accounting, data analytics. To get a start in those areas today, a student needs to have that specialized knowledge. Now, what are they going to need 10 years down the road, or even 5 years down the road when they start to manage people? They're going to need to come back for the management skills, they're going to need to come back for the leadership skills. What we don't know today is how they're going to come back. We don't know whether they're going to come back for an MBA, or an executive MBA, or an executive development program, but they are going to come back. So we need to make sure that we're partnering with businesses and that we're keeping connected with those students so that when they think about those management and leadership skills that they're going to need later in their career, or if they have to refresh themselves with a new specialty, that they come back to the business school. So there are huge opportunities here to work with businesses. And we saw an example yesterday with IE Business School, working with a business to provide leadership training. I saw a great example of this, Bocconi University, along with FGV in Sao Paulo and I think 4 other universities around the world. They are now the leadership training for Prosimian Group, which is a huge energy and telecom company around the world. They basically run the leadership training for that organization. They run it on a regional and a global basis, and a professor at Bocconi is basically that company's director of leadership training at the highest level, the C-suite level of that organization in the different regions. So you're seeing a possibility of a business school partnering with a business to provide that leadership training. There's a lot that business schools bring to the table. Businesses have that practical knowledge of what works and doesn't work in their particular environment, but business schools provide that rigorous pedagogy that will enable you to create a more enriching experience for the participants in those programs. So last but not least, actually not last yet. So leaders on leadership, sorry. I've alluded to this one earlier, but I didn't cover it in any depth. So business schools have the ability to train managers, to train leaders, not just business people, and we need them across society. So there's opportunities for business school to provide leadership training for the corporate environment. You've seen an example recently. Harvard has started a new program for the mayors of cities. It's a leadership management training program specifically for mayors. There are going to be more of those types of opportunities. We need to train these people to be more professional managers, not just politicians. And so there's a lot of work to be done there. And business schools have the ability to do that. They have the expertise to provide that leadership training across different disciplines. Now we get to last but not least. Enablers of global prosperity. And the reason this is important and the reason that we changed the mission of AACSB to be more of an enabler of global prosperity is that business schools have contributed over time enormous amounts to society and to societal well-being, but that's not frequently talked about. It's talked about in the context of, well, people go to business school to learn how to make money and to learn how to make themselves better off. Well, when I was starting university, I had no interest in business. My uncle was a small businessman. He owned gas stations in Miami. My mother ran a small business out of our home making wedding cakes. And so I was imbued with this small business. I worked my way through high school. But when I went to the university, I wanted to do something to help society. So I majored in biology, thinking that I would go to medical school or become a researcher and cure some disease. That's what I was interested in doing, but I needed to work my way through college. And so I was working for a businessman, he was an accountant, and he kept telling me, you know, you really should study accounting. I said, no, I'm here to do something good for society. I'm not here to learn how to make money. My fraternity brothers, about 50% of them were in the business school, and they keep saying, well, why are you taking Latin? You know, why don't you come over and take some economics courses or some marketing courses? And so finally I relented, and I decided, okay, well, I'll start with sort of a soft business subject, and I'll take some economics courses. And lo and behold, in my first economics course, I learned that economics is all about making society better off. It's about specialization in trade and making everybody better off. And so that really sort of enlightened me. But that's not typical. So the story that we have out there is about business schools, is about making things better for yourself. But what do millennials want today? They want to do well, but at the same time they want to do good. And so there's an opportunity for us to tell the story that's there within economics, that trade, investment, running a business, managing a business is not only good for you as an individual, it's not only good for your family, but it helps society as a whole. And I'm not just making this up, there's some data to support it. And so if you look at the UN's Millennial Development Goals, it was a goal they set from 2000 to 2015 in terms of doing things like reducing poverty. And it was enormously successful. So over that 15-year period, the number of people, the percentage of people living in extreme poverty went from 47% globally to 14%. Roughly 1 billion people were raised out of poverty. The number of primary school-age children not in school was cut in half over that time period. If you actually drill down on the data and look at it country by country, which some researchers have done, you'll see that the biggest benefits came in those countries with increases in trade and investment. So there's a connection between the level of business activity and the ability to make society better off. And we can do a better job of telling that story and working more closely with organizations like the UN going forward. So the UN now has the Sustainable Development Goals, which are ones that we want to work, or they want to work towards by 2030. And business schools can be involved here. Figuring out how to harness innovation for projects that benefit society, public and private partnerships, finding ways of funding some of these projects that need to be done. So this is a study by the Overseas Development Institute, which talks about some of the things that business schools can do. So businesses in particular, but business schools should also take ownership of this. They should be working towards telling the story of what we do to make society better off and doing more. How many of your business schools are involved either with GRLI, the Globally Responsible Leadership Institute, or PRIME, the Principles of Responsible Management Education? So a lot of you. So if you're not involved with things like that, you should get involved. AACSB are big supporters of those types of projects. And AACSB going forward will be a much bigger advocate for business education. We want to get out there and tell the story about the good things that business schools are doing. So the idea we want to get out there is business is a force for good. It's not just about making money. It's a story that it's true, and it resonates really well among millennial students. So I want to make sure we leave time for questions. So there's a few things we need to do. If you look at all of these opportunities, there's some common themes that you noticed across all of them that we need to work on. The first is we need to have an even closer relationship between academe and practice. I noted the business school started as a practitioner-oriented school, but over time, as we've done more and more on the research side, we're often now seen as being sitting in that academic silo and not paying enough attention to what the business community wants. So we need to build even closer ties with the business community, whether it's on research or leadership training or making sure that our courses are up to date. We need to drive innovation in higher education. So not just within the business school classroom, but in other parts of the university. We can take a lead role in that. And then lastly, we need to connect with other disciplines. If I'm an accountant doing research, I need to connect with people in other fields in order to help some of the world's bigger problems. So those are sort of three main takeaways, and then there's 5 opportunities that you can choose which of those may fit in your particular context. So all of this information is on our visioning website. There's a kit there that you can actually take back to share with your faculty. There's a PowerPoint presentation. There's a full brochure that talks about each of these opportunities in detail, and there's some great videos that you can share with your colleagues as well. Also, join with us in a conversation. So our Twitter handle is up there, where we'll be updating some of the things that business schools are doing in the visioning area. So with that, I would welcome some questions. Do you want me to hear or there? Okay. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al doctor Robinson por esta excelente presentación, en donde nos da un panorama de las escuelas de negocio, un análisis, y también nos invita a reflexionar en 5 áreas de oportunidades en donde podemos hacer esfuerzo para transformar nuestras organizaciones. Abrimos un espacio para preguntas. Si alguno tiene una pregunta, por favor.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Lívia. I'm from Fundação Dom Cabral in Brazil.
Can you stand up so we can see you? Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would like to hear from you some thoughts about the specific topics that business schools will have to address in the future. The specific courses and research topics that you see for the future that we have to teach and do research on.
So I think that's a difficult question in terms of particular topic areas. I do think that we need, because we don't know what jobs are going to look like in 5 or 10 years, we need to make sure we're teaching students how to learn, how to acquire knowledge, how to refresh themselves. And so the more experiential type of opportunities that we can bring in to our curriculum, the better off we are, because students need to know how to identify a problem and how to develop solutions to the problem. But the problems are going to differ in 5 years or 10 years. So rather than focus on a particular discipline, I would say our focus has to be on teaching students how to learn and the fact that they need to be lifelong learners, that they need to be continually refreshing themselves. We're going to get them ready for their first job opportunity, or perhaps their second, but we need to make sure that they know when they need to come back to get refreshed. And so my focus would mainly be on more experiential opportunities, working with real world business problems and trying to solve them.
Vamos a otra pregunta aquí.
Good morning. I was very surprised about all the things that you can do in your business school, more than all in developed countries, but our context is very difficult. I am from Ecuador. For example, my country, like you know, in this moment is the 5th worst economy in the world. What we are doing is trying to survive. And this scenario is very difficult to achieve most of the things that you have shown. But I was wondering if you have working together with another universities that are not in the group of Aacsb in order to help to grow and grow together and to have that experience that you need that the students have in the social community, but now you like university or you like the group of the AACSB with another universities of Latin America or in the emerging countries, and especially with countries that have very critical problems in order to achieve that. Problems with development of the intellectual capital of teachers, and to get funding for research and to transfer the knowledge and the experience and how to grow.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So one of the things that AACSB is running a pilot project on this year is called the Global Improvement Network. So I know a number of schools here have gone through or are currently going through the AACSB process, where the idea is a school, whether you're accredited already or not, a school always wants to get better. And one of the things that the accreditation process, one of the big values that comes out of it, is that the business school is assigned a mentor from a business school from typically another area that's more developed, not a competitor, not a local competitor, that helps them through the process and helps them get better. And so what we decided to do is take that model from the accreditation process and try it out in an emerging market. So it's called the Global Improvement Network. The pilot is going to be in Africa, so we just started it, and we're starting with 4 business schools in Africa. And what we're going to do is we're going to assign them a mentor, and AACSB is going to pick up the expenses of this process, where the school can identify a particular area that they want to work on, whether it's faculty development or curriculum development. They will attend some meetings with us. We'll have a leadership, basically a development program course that they'll take, and we'll also assign them a mentor to work with them. So we're starting it in Africa this year. If that's successful, we will be rolling it out to other markets as well. So I absolutely agree with you, there's work to be done. I do think there are things that you can do within the context of this vision, though, in Ecuador. And so that connection with business is really important. So getting business people involved in your curriculum, making sure it's up to date, bringing business people in to teach. And I know that may sound like sacrilege coming from AACSB, but I started my career as a practitioner. I was actually invited, I was working at Deloitte Haskins and Sells, I guess it's Deloitte, just Deloitte today, and we had an exchange program with Ohio State University where their faculty wanted to get business experience, and I wanted to try out teaching. And so we did an exchange. I went there and taught for a year, and one of their staff members came and did my job at Deloitte for a year. I decided I loved teaching, and I loved being able to bring practice into the classroom. If you look at the new model in the 2013 standards for AACSB, it's much more of a portfolio approach. Yes, you need to have faculty members that are doing research, and have doctorates, but you also need to have faculty members that are heavily engaged with practice, and maybe they don't have doctorates, but they're bringing that knowledge in. And so if you look now at this matrix, it's more if we think about from a finance perspective, you want a diversified portfolio. You don't want all of your faculty to look alike. So bringing business people in to help you teach, which is economically effective, but also builds that deeper connection with business and makes sure that what's being taught in the classroom is relevant. So I do think there are things within this vision that you can work on in the near term, but you'll get there on the other elements over time.
Okay. Uno más? Hey Tom, I'm Robert Gross from Thunderbird School of Global Management, once from the University of Miami as well.
Yes.
I'd like to try and give AACSB some guidance from Latin America. I was the dean at the Aacsb Business School at Tec de Monterrey. And at the Tec de Monterrey, every student must spend 240 hours in public service, some kind of social service during his or her career, without exception.
Yeah.
American business schools effectively do nothing that demonstrates social commitment. I'm going to make a criticism of American business schools, and I want you to see how AACSB might respond. I think that the social responsibility is a sine qua non. That is, it's a clear reality in Latin American business schools from Argentina to Mexico and everywhere in between, and in most emerging markets as well, where the United States doesn't pay any attention.
you're saying in the intention, anyway, of AACSB under the 2013 rules, we want to see more commitment to society. But I see at Thunderbird and at other U.S. business schools that we trained people who caused the global financial crisis, and I see finance taught right now exactly the same as it was taught in 2007 and 2006, and everything leading up to the crisis. We don't pay any attention to the behavioral issues or the idea that people have to make decisions that are not self-serving. As you said, they should be serving society. But I don't see us getting there in the United States. Would you like to respond to that, please?
Yeah, so have we gotten as far as we should? Absolutely not. Have we made progress? I think we have. You know, I practiced in the financial industry for a number of years. I was an active member of CFA Institute and ran education for them globally. And they have a very strong code of ethics. And if you look at the people that went to jail or should have gone to jail in the financial crisis, there are some bad apples within any entity. But the vast majority of the people that I knew that were practicing investment advisors that I worked with or I knew through my interactions with CFA Institute, every day were out to act in the best interest of their clients. And I think that there's 99.9% of the people out there that are actually doing the right things. They're doing the ethical things. The problem is that doesn't make the headlines in the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal. What makes the headlines are the bad behavior. Now, is there still work to be done? Absolutely. Should we change the way that investment courses are being taught to make sure more of that ethical component is there? Absolutely. And this is definitely the direction that we want to move. We are seeing more and more universities around the world engaged more in student social enterprises. I visited a school in Texas recently where they actually have a class within the accounting department, which is not where you would expect to find it, where the students go out into the low-income parts of the community and they teach, first of all, personal money management skills, and then they teach entrepreneurship skills. Here's how you start a small business so that you can provide for your family. So we're seeing more and more of that, but we want to see more. And that's why it's part of our vision for not only business schools, but also the vision of AACSB. So there'll definitely be more to come. You're right, there is a lot more we can do, and I think some schools are making good progress.
Ok, vamos con dos preguntas más porque se nos acaba el tiempo que tenemos allí y luego el doctor Jorge Talavera.
Gracias. Disculpas porque te voy a hacer la pregunta en español. Gracias.
¿En qué canal está?
Thank you. En el tema ya de formación específicamente, la velocidad con la que cambia el mundo empresarial y la innovación nos ha hecho crear paradigmas de que las herramientas que enseñábamos en otras épocas o que venimos enseñando se han desvirtuado, como el tema de, por ejemplo, enseñar un análisis DOFA o hacer planeación estratégica. Y por lo menos yo percibí en su presentación que usted utiliza las herramientas como con total validez. ¿Esas herramientas sí se desvirtúan por el tema de la innovación o siguen teniendo validez, o cómo se aplican o cómo se contextualizan?
Yeah, so a SWOT analysis is fairly traditional. It isn't the only thing that we've done. So one of the things that we've done is we've put in an agile strategic planning process. So when I came into the organization, the last time we had done strategic planning was 5 years ago. And that's traditionally what you do is every 5 years you do a new strategic plan. We now have started an agile strategic planning process. So we have 2 people in the organization that are responsible for innovation and strategy for AACSB. And what they're doing is on a continuous basis, looking at how we can be more agile and make sure that we're providing the right products and services to business schools. So I agree with you 100%. A SWOT analysis is fairly traditional, but we are trying to be more agile as an organization too. Thank you.
Jorge.
Well, I guess we are running against the clock, but I have some curiosities. I guess innovation for the School of Business or in general for the university are three major reasons. The impact that you mentioned, the differentiation, and the posicionamiento that we want for our School of Business. But innovation is a strong correlated with change. We want to change. And our sector is the most traditional of all the sectors. I mean, the university is the oldest university in Latin America is 500 years old and didn't change too much. Why we want to innovate? How we measure innovation? Paradoxical, the best innovation is the one that lasts long. And also, innovation has to be measured in terms of success. If you change and you win bankruptcy, it's not worth it at all. I have a curiosity because you mentioned some things, some opportunities, and also you say innovations that inspire, and you collect 300 innovations, and you mentioned around six, and they came from Singapore, from Canada, from Korea, from Rotterdam. I want to make some correlations against the 300 innovations. How many came from Latin America? How many came from top leading business schools all over the world? If we see the rankings, we see that in the States we have more than 1,000 business schools. In Brazil we have more than 1,000 business schools. We have a lot in Mexico. I want to see how these schools that are in the rankings and have accreditations are doing good innovation.
So I don't have that data here with me today, but I will definitely go back and take a look at it. I do know that the 300 were fairly geographically dispersed around the world. I also know that there's been a lot of work, Sumitra Duda, who's the incoming vice chair of ACSB, on innovation on a country-by-country basis, and they look at the development, how much intellectual capital that countries have developed, and and they just issued a new ranking of countries by innovation. And what would probably be interesting is to run a correlation of the FT rankings of business schools by those countries that are the most innovative. So I don't know what that would look like, but I'll definitely go back and see if we can take a look. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias al Dr. Robinson y a todos ustedes por participar en este gran evento.